Right, great. Yeah. So, yep. So as Adriana said, we'll be recording. So if you can mute your microphone and you can feel free to turn off your camera if you want to. We'll have some time for questions at the end with everything. But if anything comes up during the presentation, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat because we'll be monitoring that and we'll be sure to get to your questions before the end. So thanks everyone for being here. So we'll do some quick introductions and sort of go around so you can meet everybody who's joining us today. Adriana, you want to start us off?
Sure. So we're hosting this presentation today, your advisors and some of the members of the field team. I'm Adriana Kelly. You've seen my name, I'm sure, maybe my face sometimes. And I'm happy to have you here today.
And hi again, everybody. I'm Renee Finnemore. I'm your other academic advisor and very glad to be here talking to you about field placement with our field team.
Good afternoon. I am Christine Ferretti, and I am the field director for the online MSW. And I also teach some courses in the online MSW. So you might see some my name pop up there as well. But we are very excited to dive into your placement process and get you all up and running.
Good afternoon. My name is Josette von Berglund. Very excited to meet everybody and see everybody. Looking forward to the placement process, like Ms. Ferretti said, and thank you for attending. Look forward to working with you.
We have a few members who might not be in the room yet. Maybe they're coming or you'll see them later, but Shelley Hall and Janice Ricks are also field faculty that you will encounter during your time here in the program.
Okay, so, just to kind of give you an idea of what we'll be talking about today. So, I know that field placement is a really exciting time in the program, and it's hard to believe that, we're already talking about that when you just got started here with us last semester. But, we want to kind of talk about what that's going to look like for you. So you might have a lot of specific questions about field placement. And we anticipate that most of those questions are going to be covered in the field placement process course. And you'll hear more about that today. But the goal of today's session is really to help you prepare for that web course. So you'll learn some, but not all of the things that you need to know about field placement. And then we just really want you to have the most important information as you begin. And so we'll be focusing on those details that you need in order to make sure that you have a successful placement and begin to practice the skills that you're learning in your courses. So you'll see here kind of an overview. We're going to talk about field, getting started. What are those placement requirements? What is an employment-based field placement that you might have heard from? Ms. Ferretti and Ms. von Berglund will talk about some tips for ensuring a successful field placement and what might lead to a failed placement. And then we'll talk a little bit about if you need to take a break in the program and what does it mean about state licensure rules and what to expect your next steps and those sorts of things. So we'll hop right to it. So Ms. Ferretti, you want to start us off and tell us about all of the different people who play a role in the field team?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I am the field director. And then I also, like I said, you might see some overlap in the roles. So we have Ms. von Berglund, Ms. Hall, and Ms. Ricks are our full-time field faculty. And they work on placing students, and they also teach some of the sections of the field seminar courses. And then you have your field seminar instructors. That is going to be the person who will be teaching your field seminar course throughout both of your placement years, generalist and clinical. And so, like I mentioned, you might see some overlap. So sometimes you might have Ms. von Berglund is your assigned field faculty for your placement process. And then she also ends up being your field seminar instructor. So sometimes that happens. And then same thing with me. You might have me, I might place you or come, connect with you in some other way. And then also be your teaching your field course. But and then your field agency instructor. So your field instructor is sometimes often referred to as your supervisor, your field supervisor. And that is the person at the agency, the social worker at your agency, who is going to be supervising your work at the agency, signing off on your hours, completing your end of semester evaluation each semester. And they're going to be, communicating with the person who teaches your field seminar course. So there'll be some collaboration there. Some students and some agencies have an agency task supervisor, not always, but sometimes there are situations where an agency does not have a social worker on staff that's available to be your field instructor or your supervisor. The person might not have, an MSW, so they have a task supervisor instead. And that person is sometimes the day-to-day, oversees your day-to-day things. They can sign off on your hours, but then you would be meeting separately with a social worker for the supervision piece. So you might see the term task supervisor. It doesn't always apply. And so don't get nervous if you don't have a task supervisor. The most important thing is that we connect you and set you up with an agency field instructor. Okay, so in terms of your generalist placement, so sometimes the generalist placement is referred to as the foundation level placement. So it's entry level social work, right? So we're going to be engaging in entry level practice. So the majority of the time, we're going to be functioning as case managers, assessing the needs and the resources of the agency, or obtaining resources and providing referrals. So sometimes that looks like discharge planning, or it might look like intakes, or it might look like home visits to clients who are hospital homebound, or hospice, connecting families that have a loved one in hospice to different resources. Those are some examples. Another example would be a crisis hotline, suicide prevention hotline, a sexual assault hotline. I mentioned hospice, but again, some grief and loss programs. So psychoeducational bereavement groups, or sometimes working with families or loved ones of people who are going through cancer treatments or terminal illnesses. Emergency assistance programs, so that might look like the Salvation Army, food, housing, clothing, those types of agencies. So basically, agencies where people are coming to obtain resources and give referrals. Ms. von Berglund teaches the generalist students, and so I don't know, Josette, if you have any other kind of examples of what the generalist placement looks like. This is kind of like a broad overview, but
I think you gave some outstanding examples of the role. The only two things that I would want to mention would be the aspect of a task would be outreach. A lot of the generalist students do outreach events within the agency, very community-based. The other experience a lot of our generalist interns have is a taste of the macro and the meso learning of where does funding come from, or and just learning on a community level. We are a clinical track, but we want you to have an understanding of what that macro and meso tasks and responsibilities look like. So that may also take place during your next year.
Thank you. Okay, so next week I am planning to publish the placement process web course. So the placement process web course is a non-credit web course similar to your advising portal. And you will receive an invitation in your Knights email account to join the mandatory placement process course. And so it's not going to come, the email is not going to come from me. You know, you'll see it come from web courses, and you'll want to go ahead right away and accept the invitation to the course and start looking through the materials. So the deadlines to submit your initial application can come sooner than you think. So the first, you know, there's no, if you think about your advising portal, right, you hear web course, we're not going to get nervous about papers and things like that, right? But there are things that we need to accomplish in order to get solid information on you so that we can really have the best chance of making your placement process as smooth as possible, right? So the first assignment in the placement process course is called a placement process information form. And basically that's kind of a brief overview of, you know, where you live, and if you have any background issues that might come up that might cause a barrier, you know, things like that. And so really it's just within the first, when I open the course next week, probably within the first, definitely within the first like week and a half, I'll have those first 3 assignments that will be due. So the first one is instructions and expectations. And then the second one is like a short PowerPoint, kind of reiterating the things that we're talking about today. And then, like I mentioned, the placement process information form. So after that will be when the more detailed information that you'll be expected to give in the second module. And you'll have a little bit more time to do that. You'll have several weeks before those things are due. So the placement application is a pretty detailed document where you will answer a narrative, a brief essay response, you know, based on, you know, what brought you into social work and what populations you might be interested in working with. And then your resume. And I know that if you're, so some of you may not have done a resume in a while, but this resume is something that we're going to be sending out to agencies, right? So you're going to want to make sure that you have your Knights email listed as your email, you know, and any experience that you have. And that's what we'll be sending out to the agencies. And so Ms. Finnemore was saying in the chat, the web course is similar to what you experienced with our online MSW orientation. So modules to work through with readings, quizzes, and documents to upload. So similar structure to that. And so right after you complete the placement process information form, so maybe about a week later after that's due, that's when you will be assigned to a field faculty. So what I do is I collect all that information, and then based on how I delegate out the placements, that's when you will be assigned a field faculty. And again, that would either be Ms. Ricks, Ms. Von Berglund, or Ms. Hall, or myself. And from there, you'll know who that person is, because that person will send you an email and they'll introduce themselves. And that's kind of where the collaboration will start. Okay. Ms. Von Berglund, did you want to jump in here on this? Does that work? I know you work with a lot of students who have different scheduling, you know, expectations and things like that, and then a lot of employment based, which is the next slide. Do you mind?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Thank you.
So the placement requirements, all of this information is in the field manual, so which is also provided in the web course. So please make a point to review that material. But the basic requirements, number one is flexibility. The majority of social services do, believe it or not, happen between 8 and 5. Yes, there's a lot of 24/7 and evening shelters, hospitals, in-home services, but the learning aspect of your internship will be predominantly Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So now is a great time to start talking to the people in your life, or your jobs, your support team, of what that may look like for you when you start your internship. We also, with criminal and drug history and driving record does need to be clean. If that does come up for you, we want you to have a conversation with us in field so we can further look at that situation, because in some places, such as a Department of Human Services or Department of Children and Families, there's no exceptions if there's a criminal history in that situation. You want to submit your field application by the deadline. Communication is key. If something has come up, you need to communicate that you may be a day later. In that, if you don't make the deadline, you will receive an email with an additional deadline, or you may not be able to move forward with your plan of study. It is critical that that information comes in, because that allows us more time to work with you with finding the most appropriate fit and learning opportunity for you. You will, what kind of takes place, I guess, in that is once we, have a conversation with you, learn about your community, we want to set up an interview for you. And you will have, Miss Freddie, what is it? A couple days to respond to an email.
It gets 48 business hours.
48 business hours.
Yeah, just to confirm, just the agencies are going to be, they're expecting you to reach out by phone and or email. I would recommend both. If you're, within 48 hours, you don't have to have the interview within that time, but just that you're touching base with them within the 48 hours of.
Correct. And then, while you're working with your assigned field faculty and getting very excited about interview opportunities, there's also additional assignments to complete in the field placement orientation, or in the web course for the field placement aspect, such as the manual. What are some of the other assignments? I'm going blank right now. I can't think of them. But there's a quiz about field that you want to know more about. There's a checklist in field that you'll become familiar with. The bottom line, like the most important requirement, is communication, and open communication with your field faculty that's assigned to you. There are things that come up, and I believe that there's a slide about that. But if there's something that we can address sooner rather than later, we can usually have a successful outcome in that. And the earlier, the better that we can address it is a successful outcome also. Do you want me to cover employment-based?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So employment-based gets a little tricky and complex in certain situations. Again, the requirement is to have open communication with the field person, the field faculty assigned to you. We want to know about, if you're interested in learning more about the employment-based opportunity, we want to have a conversation with you about each of these bullet points and learn more about the agency that you're working for. But the tasks do need to be different than what you are currently doing at your agency. It's to obtain a new learning experience, not doing what you're already doing. So we want to make sure there's that opportunity within your agency and we need your supervisor to be a different person than who writes your evaluation at your job. So you'll have your employment supervisor, then you'll have your social work supervisor. Just conflict of interest, we want to make sure that the hats stay separate because you will be in a different role also. We want to make sure supervision happens once a week with an MSW with at least 2 years post MSW experience. That's important also, especially when it comes to employment-based, is we often, doing employment-based, we've seen that the student can really get caught up in their role with the agency already. And it turns into more staffing versus learning. So having a separate supervisor and that 1 hour set aside a week is about your learning process, your journey, not staffing clients in a to-do list manner. So that's the other reason we want a different role for you within your employment and a different supervisor.
I just wanted to add, I'm sorry, just something for employment-based to add there is that the very large amount of employment agencies that students work for where it is approved that they can complete their internship at that same agency will have you doing the internship hours outside of your work hours. So it's very rare and it has nothing to do with, like, we have no say over it, right? It's between the agency and the student. Sometimes I would say maybe every semester that we have employment-based, maybe only 1 to 3 students do we hear of where the agency is allowing them to do their internship hours during their work hours. All of the other ones end up being, you're doing your regular 40-hour work week, and then you're doing 10 hours a week outside of that in order to complete your internship in a different department, in a different role. So a quick example would be Children's Home Society has a foster care unit and they have an adoption unit. And so the student is doing their 40 hours a week in the foster care unit, and then they're doing 10 hours a week in the adoption unit. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for if you do think that that's something that you're going to be working with your field faculty on exploring, that you'll want to, keep that in mind when you're collaborating with your agency.
And one last thing that you'll want to be thinking ahead of time with your field faculty is you and your supervisor at work may think this is a fabulous idea and what a great learning opportunity for you. And you go talk to the other supervisor in a completely different department, like Ms. Ferretti shared. The missing link there would be, does the agency approve of it, such as HR? So we get in a lot of situations where the student and the supervisors get very excited about this opportunity, but then the agency says, no, that's a conflict of interest, no dual roles. So again, communication. I don't know how many times, I think we could just have slide after slide saying
yes,
communication. So I did want to just throw that out there in case you get real excited and go to work and talk to a supervisor maybe. It's a whole process. Slow down, take a breath, and wait until you're assigned to a field faculty so we can work out a lot of the details with you.
Yes, that's a great point. I think it can't be overstated about communication. Once you're assigned to field faculty, in my mind, there is no over communicating, right? It's like, and so you're not going to want to jump in and start saying, oh, employment-based is for me, and putting all your ducks in a row and things like that. You just kind of, you can kind of gently explore it. Like an example would be, oh, I know that I have some coworkers that have done the online MSW and they're placed at this agency, or I know my agency takes interns from other schools or something like that. But then once you're assigned a field faculty, you can kind of start working with the field faculty on all the moving parts, because as Ms. Von Berglund said, there's bureaucracy layers to go through in terms of, HR at the agency. And then if that agency is not already a partner and an approved placement site for UCF, then we have a whole other layer, which is to do an affiliation agreement and things like that. So it's worth exploring if you feel like, you want to have the conversation, but sometimes students get really super excited. Like, I already work at this agency, and so I'm just going to do my placement there. And we just like to set people up for good expectations, and have a broad understanding of kind of a bird's eye view understanding of all the moving parts. So that you're not, totally deflated if it doesn't work out.
So you'll be, oh, sorry. I think
No,
this
go
is
ahead.
me. Yeah. But if you have anything, please jump in.
No, sorry.
So up till now and until you start your field placement, you'll be used to the 7-week pace, taking one class at a time. When you start your field placement, you're going to be taking those 2 academic classes, 7 weeks each, along with your field placement. And field placement lasts the entire semester. So it's about 16 weeks for you. So that's a little different and something that might take some getting used to. It's not that an assignment will be due every week, but you're expected to be in your internship the entire semester, and actually for 3 semesters in a row. So we'll explain a little bit more about that. But it's a time when people start realizing that maybe they don't have the best time management skills, or they're just trying to figure out how to juggle life, school, work, and an internship. So it's a time when students come to us and they're like, oh, maybe I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. So this is a great time to reach out to our success coaches. Start thinking about some ways that you can lessen your load during the week to add in those 10 hours that you're going to have to be committed to going to your placement. And it's a great time to let those around you know that you might need some extra support. So start getting that into place now. It's a good idea to tell your family, to tell work, I'm going to be expected to contribute 10 hours to my placement every week. That might mean that someone else needs to take care of dinner or picking up the kids or whatever it is. It's a great time to figure out who your support system is and see how you can make sure to fit in that 10 hours. And the 10 hours is just for your placement. You also will have the class alongside it. So it's a little bit of a transition. And some students will come to us and they're like, oh, this is the time that I'm figuring out I need to work on these skills. So you can always reach out to your advisors and definitely utilize your success coach. They're great at helping with things like that.
Go ahead and talk about ensuring the successful placement. Again, communication, look at that. It's all about that communication with faculty throughout the whole placement process. And remembering that this is a professional interview, a professional internship, professional emails, professional resumes. My big thing when working with students in the placement process is get a signature on that email, because you're going to be emailing people at, professionals with, during the placement process. So remembering that, yeah, this is school, but nope, this is professional. And that includes behaviors too. To ensure a successful placement, flexibility in your schedule and your expectations. Flexibility in your schedule. It is very difficult when a student comes to us and says, I'm sorry, I'm only available after 6 p.m. We might have to, sit down and have, a solid conversation about that. following up with what, Ms. Kelly was saying of, talking to your support networks and your success coaches and your advisors. Flexibility and expectations is kind of ties into open to unexpected opportunities. You may really want to be placed at a hospital. And we may have a conversation that's really maybe more appropriate for a clinical internship and not a generalist, or what's going on in your community as we heal from COVID. So we have to look at all the variables that come in to the opportunities that may be available. So being flexible and unexpected opportunities also would be, you might really learn about a whole new population and be really excited and change routes in maybe your long-term goals. So that's always fun. Reliable transportation to and from. So in the field manual, it does state that you may need to travel up to an hour to the agency. Of course, we try to look at what's right directly in your community. If that's, a possibility, we're going to explore that, but it may not be 5 miles down the road or 5 minutes down the road. It may be up to an hour. Also, depending on where you live, you may already be well aware of that. We have had a lot of students say, oh, I already know I'm driving 72 miles to get into town. Oh my goodness. So you may already be counting on that. Okay, back to communication. Always looking through your night's emails. That is how we'll communicate, just like Miss Freddie said in the beginning. We'll be through your night's email, not through the web course. You'll see that we'll start a lot of email trails and sometimes include an agency within that. So we need to use your night's email to enhance that level of communication. You will be expected to monitor that night's email at least 3 to 4 times a week. Anything to add, Ms. Freddie?
No, I think that's really good. And you'll want to, you'll want to keep in mind that there may be some collaboration on your end that's needed. If you are in a area where we don't have any active partnerships. So because we place students every semester and they live, across the nation, sometimes you might live in an area where we have no partnership yet or very limited partnerships, which at first can seem scary to the student, but it's not scary because then we're starting with a clean slate, right? And you get to be the trailblazer, and maybe you get to be the first UCF student that's placed in that agency, and it kind of trails the way for future students to be placed there. So there might be some of you might hear that a student was set up with an interview and then they go on the interview and then that's it, right? And then others of you might say, oh, well, I'm hearing of people who are having to collaborate with their field faculty a little more heavily to kind of look in my community or do some Google searching or things like that to look for names of agencies or possible agencies to explore. So I just wanted to kind of throw in there that, you will hear different situations, and some students are having to collaborate. We kind of need a little bit more collaboration than others in terms of that. But if you hear that from your field faculty that you are in an area where we have never placed a student yet, I just wanted to let you know, like, don't panic, right? Because it's an opportunity for us to use our macro social work skills, right? And kind of survey our community, and the field faculty will walk you through that for sure. I do see there's a question. Do you want me to answer the questions in the chat now? Okay, so the 40 hours can you please explain the 40 hours being separate from the 10 hours one more time? Okay, so all I meant with that was that if you are in a situation where an employment-based internship is approved, meaning that you work in an agency already and you are approved to also do your complete your field placement at that agency in a different department with a different supervisor, that the agency will very likely have you do your 40-hour work and then have you complete your 10 hours of internship outside of those 40 hours. Does that make sense? So that what I was saying only applies to if a student is doing employment based, just that the agency would say, yes, fine, you can complete internship hours here. You're going to do your job for 40 hours. And then 10 hours outside of that, separate from that, is when you're going to complete your internship.
That way.
Okay.
The failed placement. Oh my goodness, look at number one. You don't communicate with your faculty. We really cannot stress communication enough. When we don't hear from a student after several attempts, we ask academic advisors to jump in. We ask, hey, is everything okay? They reach out. We, generally get concerned. Then we also wonder, are you still in the program? Like, what's going on? Are we still finding a placement? So we want to make sure communication continues. A failed placement may result in too restricted of a schedule of opportunity. Like I said, you're only available after 6 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or, a lot of students think that they can go to an internship and just do one day, 10 hours, because they're working the other 4. There's a lot of agents, majority, 99% of our agencies want you there at least 2 days a week at maybe 5 hours. But having you there 2 days a week, not just for the learning aspect, but for the engagement part of learning as a team, understanding how the agency operates. So you need that flexibility or that availability, like going back to Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You suddenly quit your job where you're doing your placement. So tying into the employment-based internship. If you quit your job, you're quitting your internship. And that means you no longer have a placement. And we would really need to, talk about that in great detail of moving forward. That may impact your plan of study. You move without informing us. And we're still looking for agencies in Kansas City, and now you moved over to LA, California, and we didn't know. Again, communication. Or you move while, and it's too late in the semester to start looking for agencies in the new community. That probably will impact your plan of study and being able to start your internship this next round. Another guaranteed way of a failed placement is to refuse the interview in the beginning or to decline a placement, again, without further discussing it. This all comes down to communication. There's many reasons that I can think of going to a job interview that would really put up some red flags. Well, I'm not just going to, decline. I'm going to go home, maybe talk about it a little bit. Same with the internship. We have to be able to communicate if there are concerns that you're having, but an outright refusal just because you don't want to work in a nursing home, you really wanted to work with newborns or prenatal care. again, this is the learning opportunity. This is the learning goal of our social work profession, not job placement. We are not a job placement agency. We are finding opportunities that's a good fit for you to learn. So we want to really stay away from refusing or just outright declining a placement without further discussion on that. I think that covered them all.
Yes, for sure. I think it's really important, like Ms. von Berglund said, to remember that in order to get your MSW, right, you've got to successfully complete these 2 years of internships. And we have to abide by the CSWE, the Council of Social Work Education accreditation standards. And in doing that, we've got to ensure that certain learning competencies are met within these placements. So we're not looking at a priority of you want to work in a hospital when you graduate, and so you've got to be placed in a hospital. That's not the priority, and it's not the goal. The goal is to get, at this point, is to get you your MSW. I mean, if it lines up that way, that's beautiful. But our role and our responsibility is to find you an appropriate agency to accomplish and demonstrate your learning competencies. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that point. Ms. von Berglund, what was the motto that you used to say several years ago about donuts? What was?
About donuts. Ooh, I'm gonna have to think about that.
Was it? Do you remember or no?
Let me think about it.
Okay, it was. I remember what it is, but I didn't want to take your. Yeah, I didn't want to take your motto.
Take
but
it.
If you don't remember, so Ms. von Berglund used to say to students incoming field that Krispy Kreme, Dunkin' Donuts, 7-Eleven, right? You learn how to make donuts, like you can make donuts, right? So we're learning how to make donuts, and then after you graduate, you'll know how to make the donuts at all the different. Does that ring a bell, or am I?
You know what? I'm not even going to claim it. I don't think I've.
Okay.
It's mine. But whoever did say that is genius. I really like that.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It's really demonstrating that it's to get the skills. It's
yes.
to address all of our competencies in our learning. And then you graduate, you take that skill set, you put it to the population that you're going to work with.
Yes.
No, but I want to know who did say that, because that's really good, but not me.
I thought it was you.
No.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about when you might need to take a break in the program. So this can happen, if you're experiencing any of these particular situations. So perhaps you need to move, and the field application is due in a few weeks, and you're not sure where you're going to be living or when you will be in that new location. Or if you think you might be relocating at any time during your field placement. So, moving within the same town where you can still commute to your field placement, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like the example Ms. von Berglund gave, where you're moving from one city to another where it's too far for you to commute. That would be what we'd want to speak to you about, and kind of see how that impacts your plan of study. Because this field placement that you're going to be assigned to, you'll be at for 3 consecutive semesters, including the breaks between semesters and the breaks between terms in a semester. So you need to be able to attend that entire, almost a whole calendar year. And so if you think you might be moving during that time, we need to talk about that and how that could impact you. Health concerns. So if you have serious health issues that, could really impact your ability to complete field placement, or if you're expecting a baby and will want to take time off after the baby arrives, or that you might be responsible for the care of a family member with serious health concerns, then we would want to talk to you about that to sort of see, what is your specific situation and how that is going to impact your field placement. Some students do have concerns about the cost related to field, especially if they find that they need to reduce their work hours in order to accommodate the field placement, or they need to leave their job because their job just it requires them to be on site Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and there's no flexibility in that. And so they need to find a different job. Sometimes that can impact when they can start field placement. And then any personal issues that you might have that you think might create a barrier for you in terms of a successful placement and completion at the same agency for 3 semesters. So we would want to talk to you about that to sort of discuss those specifics and see how that might happen. So if any of these types of situations apply to you, then you would want to reach out to me to sort of talk about that and, you know, what strategies you can use to sort of put into place. And then if we need to have you sit out for a semester or 2 or maybe longer, what that would look like and how you would go about doing that. And we would revise your plan of study and submit whatever paperwork is necessary to the university to accommodate that.
So our program is geared towards pursuing clinical licensure once you graduate. Not everybody goes on to do that, but a lot of you do. We want to make sure that you know your state's licensure rules, what you need in order to get licensed in your state once you graduate. We're sure that our program meets the requirements for the state of Florida, but we cannot guarantee that they meet your state's requirements. So you need to check this out so you're aware of it before you start moving forward. You can find your state social work requirements for licensure you can Google your state plus clinical licensure. They're called various different things depending on the state that you're in. So in Florida, you're going to be in LCSW, but in other states, it might be a little different. Google is a great way to find it. We also have a link here. We will provide this PowerPoint to you after the session. So you can click the link and you can find your state's board so you can find the information. It can be a lot. If you get overwhelmed or you can't find what you're looking for, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help you make note of what rules apply to you and what you need to know when you're going to pursue licensure. This is typically what states are looking for, is that you earned your MSW from an accredited institution. We are accredited by the CSWE, and that you are in a field placement. And we will confirm that once you graduate with your state's board. But occasionally there are some additional requirements that you'll want to make sure that you're meeting. So be sure to check those things out. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. Oh, we have 2 questions in the chat. Maybe we'll get to those. Katie wants to know, when will the hours start? Will our start dates depend on the agency's needs? Is it generally September? So I don't know if one of the field members wants to address that.
Field, according to our calendar, field starts the week of August 29th. So that is when that's when field begins. You want to be ready. There are times that agencies, again, comes down to communication. I love this. With your field, faculty that's placing you and the agency, is sometimes their onboarding process may be the second week of every month, and they're never going to change that. Well, then we'll work with you as you start maybe a week or 2 late. There may be an agency that asks, are you available because of the onboarding process and training, maybe the week before. Again, it comes down to communication. Sometimes, a student says, well, no, because I knew I really wasn't going to take a vacation for a year, I'm going to be on vacation that week, so I can't. Well, then let's talk that out and see what it looks like. So, but I would say the majority of our students do start within that week. It doesn't have to be Monday either. It could be Wednesday. It could be on the schedule that you and your supervisor has agreed upon.
Okay, and the next question is it necessary to have an LCSW if you're interested in macro or corporate social work? So our track is geared
oh,
towards it's
yeah.
a clinical track, and it's that's our specialization. But please, Christine, by all
Yeah,
means,
no,
please.
yeah. So the program, like Miss Kelly said, it's a clinical focus. But if you get your MSW and you don't wish to pursue licensure, I would say that it's going to be up to what agencies you're looking at in terms of the macro corporate. Because what I have found here, just in, as far as Florida goes, is that agencies, even if you are more in corporate or macro, they're still wanting people to have an LCSW. And I'm not, and then I started my social work career in New Jersey, and that was not really the case there. There's a second, when you get your MSW, you can become an LSW, which is a licensed social worker. And then if you want to be strictly clinical, then you can be an LCSW. So a little different from state to state. I'm thinking the best thing to do would be maybe in your state to kind of look around for, jobs that you would be interested in, and what does that person have a license or not. So maybe doing some LinkedIn or some Googling in some corporations or macro roles, and maybe seeing if, if those people have. So sorry, that's not a cut and dry answer, but that's just kind of an overview of what I've seen.
Okay, so one of the things that you're going to be doing next after today's session, I will be sending out an email to you with a link to today's session recording, a copy of the webinar, a link to complete a survey, basically like an evaluation of today's session, and just kind of ask you, how you're feeling about getting started in the process. And then there'll be a link for you to schedule an advising appointment with me. And the purpose of that appointment is for us to sort of connect and talk about the things that you're going to be doing as you're just getting started in the field placement process. So we're really going to focus on the things that you're going to be putting on that field information form, that first initial form, which is really about your location and any agencies that you know of, the things that you're passionate about, what your goals are in terms of what you're hoping to learn in field, and then any potential barriers that you might have. And so this appointment time is for you to sort of answer some questions as that relates to your plan of study, and then also helping to prepare you for the conversations that you're going to want to have with your field faculty and getting you ready for preparing all of the documents that you need to complete in the field placement process web course. So talking to you about getting that resume ready, completing the field application, what sorts of conversations you want to have with your field faculty, how to let them know certain things. So we'll be talking about those things in that appointment.
So now we've given you a lot of information. What do you do next? What's next? So the first thing is we're going to make sure that you have a copy of this. We'll send you the link to the video as well as the PowerPoint presentation so that you can go back and look at it and start thinking about what you need to be successful in your field placement. So now is time to start thinking about, do I have transportation? Do I have schedule flexibility? How can I work that out? What are the requirements in my state to get licensed if I'm interested in that? Do I have the appropriate professional attire? Those kinds of things you'll want to start thinking about. Maybe make a list and start thinking as you prepare to apply for field. Just get your ducks in a row. Please monitor your email. That's really important for field and just for being in the program in general, because we'll send out announcements. For example, you'll get on Monday your registration email for the summer. So please be sure to be checking your Knight's email account. Like Ms. Von Bergelen and Ms. Freddie said, you have 48 hours once you get that email that you've been matched with an agency to reach out to them. So we don't want you to miss those opportunities. So be sure to be checking that. And also for that email from Ms. Finnemore to set up an advising appointment with her. Also start getting your support ready. So you know that you're going to need 10 hours a week at a placement. So what's that going to look like for you? What are you going to, if you have a lot of balls in the air, is there something that you can give to someone else? Start thinking about that kind of stuff. And there's an excellent website that we've linked here called Field Anxiety. And it's just a great place where if you're thinking about things that you don't know about what field's going to be like, or some concerns you might have, it's just a great resource to click around and check out to alleviate some of those concerns and just get more information about what field will be like. And I think we have a question in the chat. Angela says, my power went out, so you may have said this, but is there a list by area that has the available placements and maybe what they have open so you can see if you can adjust to their schedule?
I wish. And no. Unfortunately, well, it's a good problem to have, but fortunately and unfortunately, because we have new cohorts of students coming in each semester, and we never know where students are going to be living until they enter into the program and enter into field. We don't have something like that. But we try to delegate I try to delegate the field faculty placements for students that are like always in the same area. So just for example, Miss Hall generally places all the students that live in the Central Florida area. And in the Panhandle and in Leon County, for example. And then Miss Ricks most often places students in Tampa, Miami, South Florida, and some out of state. And then Miss Von Berglund places students that live out of state where we've already had partnerships, things like that. And so because we're such a big program and so spread out, our students, which we're very excited about, but we're not able to provide something like that. But it's definitely going to be a hands-on process. You're definitely not going to be on an island, right? Because we wouldn't want our students just, kind of out there in the dark. So definitely a collaborative process. I'm going to open the course. I'm going to open the course on the 28th of March. And you'll see that come through, like I said, an email from Web Courses inviting you into the course. And then that placement process information form will probably be due like that following weekend. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the dates. Like maybe by the 8th or so. That first thing. So then that way, the sooner we can get that in, the sooner I can assign each of you to a field faculty, so that ideally you would all know who your field faculty is going to be by like the second week of April. Then you would all know who your assigned field faculty is going to be, and you can start those conversations.
So I think now we'll go ahead and open it up to any more questions anyone has. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, or go ahead and type it in the chat and we will be happy to address them.
I have a question. I think you touched on this briefly, but I can't remember the answer. I know it's 10 hours to plan on the internship. On top of that, about estimated how much time should you be allocating for the academic study part of the course to help with our time management?
Josette, do you think you could? Because I know the generalist, when you get to clinical year, I teach the clinical students, so the time is a little bit different because you've already gone through the 3 generalist field courses. And so you have like you find a flow by clinical year, but Ms. Von Berglund teaches the generalist, so.
Yeah, the assignments that are in the field course they're all about your learning journey and applying and relating the competencies of our goal of learning to what you're learning and experiencing. So we don't have research-based papers, APA intense, right? It is about you and your learning journey with guided questions, videos. I can't say exactly each assignment, But compared to your 7.5 week intensive courses, it's not even comparable with the amount of time that you would be. And they're every other week. And we'll share more information about that. So the class that has the guided assignments, guided questions about your learning journey is on an every other week basis. And then the other class is handing in your signatures for your field logs and your supervision forms. Each semester, or the first semester in your generalist year, you have your learning contract. That is the biggest assignment, time-wise and importance and points. It's your treatment plan for the year. So it does take some time, but it's over 2 months that you're working on it. So again, if you don't wait till last minute, you can distribute the time out and you're working on it with your supervisor. So again, it's not that research paper, APA, this is about your learning journey. The second semester, the big assignment of time and importance is your agency presentation. If you don't wait till the last minute, you can, dedicate 15 minutes a week, 20 minutes a week, and with the amount of time that you have to finish it. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
another question about the timing. So I understand it's 10 hours in the internship, and it's your expectation is that it's a year long, but something happens and you can't go for a week. Do you communicate that? Do you work directly with the agency to adjust your schedule, or does that go through your UCF coordinators if you have to have a change to your schedule for whatever reason?
Jump in, answer it. Ideally, it's going to be your supervisor at work. We are not here as a field faculty to micromanage your learning journey. Once we work intensely with you to find that great fit with an agency, get you set up, you're in there, you're assigned your field professor, and then you would communicate like you would with a job, or and so that comes out in those first couple weeks of field. Who do I contact if I'm not feeling well? And then, you would want to make a plan on how you're going to make up those hours. Now, if it's of a great sickness, illness, serious injury or something, you can always let your field professor know. And then they may be able to assist you and your supervisor with planning on how to make up those hours. If you've been out, 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it's 20 hours, that becomes sometimes overwhelming. So, okay, I'm going to say it again, communication. It comes down to that communication aspect of it.
Thank you.
You'll definitely want, like Ms. von Berglund said, to always have, if you're supposed to be there on a Monday and you can't make it and it's an emergency, or that you need to be out in 2 weeks for an appointment or you'll definitely want your first point of contact to be the person at your agency. You're not going to get in trouble for letting the person who teaches your courses know, right? So if you want to let them know too, that's fine, but you don't need to worry about, like Ms. von Berglund said, kind of like if you miss a week, you're going to get poorly marked. It's really, okay, work out a plan for how you're going to make up those 10 hours, by the end of the semester. Sometimes agencies have different like fairs or different projects to work on that maybe you're going to do, maybe you're going to do 15 hours that week if you're working on something extra, right? And then you pull back the next week. I've Miss Finnemore and Miss Kelly often tell me about students who try to find a flow for in between, like the 7-week courses, like when your final papers are due in the 7-week courses. Sometimes they might work with their agencies ahead of time and say, hey, I have this really big assignment coming up. I'm going to rearrange my schedule for, can I rearrange my schedule a little bit during those times? Because really, with the 7-week courses, you do get like a little bit of a break in between the 7-week courses, but like that doesn't apply to field. And so you guys are just going straight through, right? But you can work with the agency a little bit and kind of explain to them like, hey, would this be possible if I kind of structured things a little bit differently during this time frame? And what I love about the field courses is that they're all structured the same way for 3 semesters of clinical and 3 semesters of generalist, and then the 3 semesters of clinical. So once you enter into field in fall and you see how the course is structured, that's literally how it's going to be for the next several semesters, all through the 3 semesters of generalist and clinical. Every other week, discussion posts, field logs, like reflections on what you've been up to in your placement the past 2 weeks. Every assignment is going to have to do with a learning competency. So it's basically like competency 1, professionalism, some little reflection about how you demonstrated that, or maybe you've seen a not good demonstration of professionalism in your agency, things like that. That other course, when Miss Kelly was saying there's 2 courses and Miss Von Berglund mentioned this, that other course that's $59.40 is literally just for you to upload your supervision sign off and your hours sign off. So that's like a 2-minute every other week thing. The other classes, like Miss Von Berglund said, discussion posts and an agency presentation in 1 semester and things like that. So really more reflective in field, right? It's not right or wrong, like your theories class and human behavior, right? It's like you're studying from a textbook and you're having to, the field is really more about the application and your experience, if that helps lessen any kind of stress. Yeah.
And I think just to kind of wrap up on that, I do want to stress to students that if you're ever experiencing some sort of extenuating circumstance, so I'm not talking about like you got the flu and you had to stay home from your placement this week. I'm talking about like a major accident, a major medical concern, a death in your family, you've lost your job, something where your life is sort of turned, significantly, you absolutely need to tell your field faculty and your agency. And then also you reach out to your advisors, because we're here to support you, and your field, your field seminar instructor can help you make a plan to ensure, like, if there's going to be an issue where you're not going to be able to complete the hours required for the semester, how are we going to address that? How do we make sure that you have the support you need at the agency if you can't be there or you need to make up hours? And what do we need to do? Because something like that might also affect your academic courses. So we've had students struggle sometimes where they've put all of their energy into field because they think that's the most important thing, because they're getting ready to work in the profession, and they forget that they have to pass all of those academic courses too. So so just keep that in mind, that like you need to keep your energy up for those 7-week academic courses, because the policies still apply in terms of the minimum grades to attain, but also something that might impact you in field could also impact you in those academic courses. So just keep that in mind, and remember that even though you're in field, there's lots of people still in your support network here in the program. Does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up for today? I appreciate everybody who, kind of hung in there. We're running a little bit over time today, but if anyone has any final questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi. Question is, I know you talked about overlap between employment and field hours. What about if you're currently doing like some volunteer work with something that might also count towards field hours? Like for instance, a crisis text line or something like that, a crisis hotline. Is that something that would like count towards that? Or are we really looking towards getting different experiences, obviously, as well? So do you mind touching on that?
I think that's a great question, and there's not a blanket answer. we would really want to know, well, how long have you been engaged? And what would be some new learning opportunities to challenge yourself? Y'all are paying some really good money for this opportunity, right? So we want to make sure we can help you experience that. And so there's not a blanket answer of a yes or a no. That would be a great conversation to have, I think, is the best way to answer that without a solid no. Does that
Anything's worth a discussion.
Yeah, everything's worth a discussion.
Yep. There's definitely a reason why, they hire very like social workers with extensive clinical skills in field faculty positions, right? Because we're having to pivot and kind of, find ways for things to fit and explore and things like that. So I saw someone else putting their thumb up. I think it was Lynn when you asked that question, Carolyn. So I definitely think it's always worth a conversation. Yeah. And there has been
I am
times where it's worth it.
volunteering on a crisis line. Sorry,
Okay.
Christina.
No,
I am
that's fine.
volunteering on a crisis
Yeah.
line, and I'm thinking the same question. And
Mhm.
really, I think I could, maybe perhaps start helping in the grief groups or something
Nice.
to that effect. So
Great.
yeah, I'm exploring the same thing. So thank
Great.
you for
Yeah.
asking that, Carolyn.
Thank
Great.
you guys
Well,
so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to connecting with you again in the next few weeks. Have a good
Great
day, everyone.
information. Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you all so much for helping us.
No
You're welcome.
problem.
Have a great
Best
day.
part.
Best
Bye.
part. Yep. That's so true.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you,
everyone.
Renee and Adriana, also.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Appreciate it.